Thanks for staying with us here on The Real Story. Ahead of Thanksgiving and mid-Native American Heritage Month, we're talking to Liz Glaviano, the Director of Museum Education at Nowashe Village in South Windsor. Liz, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So there are a lot of rich Native cultures across Connecticut, but specifically in South Windsor's history. Tell me a little bit about Nowashe Village. What is it?
So Nowashe is an Indigenous people's village. It's set on approximately 1 acre along Main Street. And we know that in 1614, Adrian Block, who was a Dutch explorer, sailed up the Connecticut River. And his cartographer, Johan de Laet, wrote copious notes about all the peoples that they encountered. And so right about where the East Hartford and South Windsor line meet, Adrian Block and Johan de Laet encountered a palisaded fort, right? So a protected fort where a group of Indigenous people lived. And so in his writings, Adrian Block called these people the Nowashe tribe, right? And fast forward through time, they became known as the Podunk tribe. Now, Podunk is a name in Algonquin that actually means place on a hill. And so you'll see in Connecticut history that some of the tribal names that have come about actually are referring to place names as well. Right?
Right.
And so Nowashe is a vibrant village that really amplifies the voices of Indigenous peoples and the lifeways of Indigenous peoples. And so we have Indigenous peoples from all over New England, educators coming there to present on their lifeways. So everything from cooking demonstrations to storytelling. We also do atlatl throwing, which is spear throwing at woolly mammoth targets. Yes, it's a very exciting, eclectic experience.
Wonderful. And I know you brought some artifacts for us today. We don't have too much time, but let's quickly run through some of the things. I know you said some of the stuff over here was the oldest.
Yes, so we're starting with the oldest things first. And so what you see there is a steatite mortar and pestle. And so that is from what's known as the Archaic era. And that's approximately 9,000 to 3,000 years ago. And so, you know, tools such as those, the mortar and pestle, they would be used to crush nuts, crush seeds.
And still used today.
You can find it in Williams and Sonoma. When I go in there, I say, "Wow, there's nothing new under the sun."
Exactly. They decided this worked well.
If it's not broke,
Exactly. And what do we have here?
You know what? That is such an exciting new. Someone donated that to us. It is called a paint pot. So we know that Indigenous peoples who lived in Connecticut used natural pigments to paint their bodies and dye their clothing. What's very interesting about that paint pot is that the material that was used as the dye was not mixed in that paint pot, but rather is inherent in the paint pot. And you can see the scrape marks. In there. And so you see someone actually was scraping that material out. And I just think that's fascinating. Fascinating.
So before we get to the rest of these things real quick, you know, as we learn a lot about these different roots, there are still a lot of unknowns. You said this item was recently just donated. So since you're connected to the library, you're part of a lot of that work here in Connecticut. And tell me a little bit about how there is still a lot that you and we don't know.
Oh, sure. I mean, there were so many Native peoples living in Connecticut, living all along New England. And I don't know that we're ever going to really have an accurate population number, right? Because of the genocide, because of the epidemics, right? And so what we have, I mean, it's so exciting to work with the Wood Memorial Library and at Nowashe Village, because I always say every day is like a holiday because some days I will literally be sitting at my desk and someone will walk in. This happened this past summer. Someone walked in and said, "Oh, look what I found." And it was an axe head.
Wow.
That hadn't been seen for how many thousands of years. But farmers churning up their soil, they churn up artifacts.
Right.
Yes.
And there's so much history left still.
There is so
in
much
our land.
Yes.
And you said, it kind of feels like every day is a holiday.
Yes.
We have a holiday coming up in just a couple weeks here across the country. And, I think it comes to mind for a lot of people when families get together to celebrate Thanksgiving that it has been muddled with a lot of different history and maybe a lot of myths. And, let's talk a little bit about that. What is that education process like? And is there anything you would say to people about maybe taking the holiday as a time to gather with their families, but maybe also look a little bit at the education and maybe the real history behind Thanksgiving?
Right. So I had recently completed my thesis on Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
But it was basically, it's called No Thanks, No Giving. And it's Thanksgiving, looking at Thanksgiving from the other side of the table. And so Thanksgiving for Native peoples and the ones that I had interviewed is a very painful holiday. And it is called the National Day of Mourning. And every year there is a protest that is held in Plymouth, and it is the National Day of Mourning. It began in 1970 with Wamsutta James, and he really galvanized people to say, let's start teaching people the real meaning behind Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving is a complicated U.S. holiday because I think in one sense we've been told a fairy tale version, but Indigenous peoples, if it weren't for Indigenous peoples, we wouldn't be here because Puritans, pilgrims, didn't know how to survive. So my thoughts on Thanksgiving are, if you want to educate yourself, really look up the National Day of Mourning. Look up the history and how that came about, because that was sandwiched. That was right in the civil rights movement, right? And that was with the AIM movement that was going on and all across the country. So, and I would say, perhaps take a moment of silence to think about the Indigenous peoples who lived and who were thriving here for thousands of years.
An opportunity for people to, enjoy some turkey with their family, but also have some education and then take a look back at, as you said, really that true history. We just have a little bit of time left. So really quickly, I want to give you an opportunity just to point out a couple more things here on the table, these moccasins.
So these moccasins are fabulous. They are made of elk hide, and a member of the Lenape tribe made these. And they are trimmed with mink fur. Wow. They are so incredibly comfortable. If you slip your hand in there, your hand is so incredibly warm. And right here, we have a clay pot. Wow. And it is, it's a reproduction woodland era clay pot, right? And so woodland era is like 3,000 years ago until, I would say, a little bit after the European contact. And made in the traditional manner, not fired in a kiln, fired in an outdoor fire.
Wow.
Yes.
All right, so you have a couple more things here, and you brought this from the Nowashe village. So
I did.
With our last minute here, when are you open? What do you want people to know about coming, and how can they look into this and learn more?
Oh, sure. So we are open every Monday and Thursday. Nowashe is open for everyone to come in, and we have self-guided tours. We have docent-led tours. We have field trips, classes. If you visit nowashe.org, everything that you need to know is on there.
Wonderful.
And we house over 20,000 Indigenous artifacts.
Wow, and as you
Yes.
said, education opportunities, even from, lost tribes here in Connecticut,
Sure.
opportunities for people to come and learn. Well, Liz, thank you so much for joining us, talking about
Thank
this,
you.
and for showing us a little bit of this history.
My pleasure.
Of course. Well, that does it for us here on The Real Story. But if you want to watch these segments again, you can head to fox61.com or download the free Fox 61 News app, and you can watch The Real Story every Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on Fox 61 or streaming on Fox 61 Plus. Have a great morning.